My name is Femi Adewole. I'm a trained architect, but lately also a housing finance professional. I run a non-bank financial institution that provides financing for public and private sector developers who are promoting affordable housing schemes across Nigeria. Those four things that I've said are really the critical things you need. Of course, along the way, it's impossible for, well, let me say not impossible, but almost impossible for any prospective borrower or developer to answer all of those questions in a way that the lender thinks there is no risk to this project. So typically, in answering those four questions, the lender will feel that yes, it's okay, but there's still some overhanging risks there. And because the lender feels that, the lender will try to mitigate those outstanding risks by asking for some more assurances. So for example, if the lender feels that you really don't have a lot of, maybe you have some experience of building the house, but you really don't have a fully convincing experience, he will ask you, for example, to give him a performance bond. And that means he's transferring that risk to somebody else, which means that if you don't build the house or you have to run away at some point, he can get his money back. If you tell the lender about your arrangement for selling the houses, because you've not actually sold the houses, and therefore there's a little bit of speculation and projection, the lender might feel, okay, he's reasonably assured that you will sell the houses, but that risk has not been totally eliminated. He will want to plug that additional gap and by saying, for example, maybe you get somebody to give him an offtake guarantee, for example. So it depends on how the first discussion goes and what the developer sees as some outstanding issues that have not been covered. What he would then do naturally is to ask for other things to try to cover that hole. Generally speaking, most project financiers require that you have a skin in the game. Okay? They require that you have a skin in the game. Otherwise, if they finance you to buy the land, they finance you to build the houses, when something goes wrong, you will just carry your briefcase and you walk off. And the lender is then left with a half-completed building that is all his money. So, yes, generally speaking, there are a few rare exceptions. But generally speaking, most lenders will insist that you have the land. Beyond that, the land is in your name. The land has a legal title, primarily as a source of equity. Because when they borrow you the money, you will have to give that land to them as a collateral for the loan. Now, if the land doesn't belong to you, you don't have a collateral to give them. You are basically giving them what already belongs to them. That means you don't have any skin in this game. And I think most lenders will be very concerned to deal with a borrower who has nothing to lose if things go wrong. That is the reason why we expect that the borrower needs to have some skin in the game. And that skin in the game is typically land. In some cases, in addition to land, some cash to ensure that they also can feel some pain if things go wrong. Different lenders have different approaches. So there are lenders who say that they need you to own the land, and in addition, they will only finance maybe 80% of the construction costs. In that case, to deal with those kind of lenders, you need to have 20% of the construction cost. There are lenders who, I know one who will only finance 60% of the construction cost. That means as a borrower, you need to come up with 40% of the development cost. And there are others who are a bit more generous, who say we will finance 90%, even 100% of the construction cost. So different lenders, depending on their appetite for risk and where they are in terms of their own business strategies, have different requirements. But the principle is the same, that they expect that when they give you money, that you will pay the money back, and that you have several reasons why you will be encouraged or persuaded, or you think it makes sense to give the money back, because you have something to lose if you don't give the money back. Okay, so housing finance operates, I suspect, like most assets, what we call a relay facility structure. So that means that you first have to borrow money to build the house. And when the house is built, then you take what is called a mortgage, which you repay over a longer period of time. So essentially you have two loans. You have a loan to build the house, and then a loan 2, which kills loan 1, which you pay over 25 years depending on your age. Okay, so because loan 1, which is really the project finance that you refer to, is primarily meant to construct the house, it is a short-term loan. So it could be as low as 18 months to 3 years, 4 years, whatever period is required to construct the assets. Okay, so a construction loan is not a long-term loan. It's basically intended to create the asset, which in this case is the house, and once it has created the house, then the mortgage providers will come on board to issue a mortgage, which is now more of a long-term facility. So that's an interesting question. It depends on how you interpret the question. Is it possible to build without borrowing money from the bank? So that's one interpretation of the question. Yes, the fact is that maybe 70 to 80% of homes that are built in Nigeria are built without bank or any form of institutional finance. People generally practice what we call incremental housing. So, they buy a piece of land and then they relax a little bit. When they get a little bit of money, they will call somebody to dig the foundations for them. So they will spend a little bit of money, usually from their own resources and their own savings. Do the foundation, slow down and rest a little bit. They accumulate a little bit more money. They go back, do the walls, and therefore they can be on this process for maybe 5, 6, 7, maybe even longer, because now they are building out of their own savings. So this is a very common approach to building, particularly in markets like Nigeria, where our mortgage sector is significantly underdeveloped. It's a fairly common way in which people develop their houses. So it's not as unusual as one might think. And the truth is that most people are actually building without access to financing from institutions like the one that I work with. Okay, so final thoughts. One is that a lot of aspiring project promoters or developers are intimidated by the process of accessing finance or requesting for finance. I think one thought is that the process is not and should not be as complicated as is widely believed. For most lenders, they simply have one requirement and one requirement only. And that requirement is that when I give my money to this promoter or developer, am I going to get my money back, and am I going to get it back in time? So if people prepare their projects in that way, it is likely that they will get financing for their project. The fact is that a project that is not able to repay the lender is also likely that it will be unprofitable for the developer. So that leads me to my second thought, that the borrower and the lender, in this case the institutions, are actually not enemies. They are on the same side. And I think that developers need to see financial institutions and project finance institutions as their friends, because typically when we decline to fund a project is because we have seen that that project is not going to work. And because we have the technical tools to do so, we can determine that this project will not behave in the way that possibly the developer wants it to behave. And therefore, we're on the same side. If a project meets our requirements for funding, it's almost likely that it's because we have seen that it will not just only pay us in terms of being able to repay our loan, it's also that it's going to return profit to the developer. So I think that developers and promoters of projects need to see the lender and themselves as being really on the same side. Okay, so I think that's the second thought. The third thought, I think, is the fact that people must continue to look at opportunities for improving the quality of their development to minimize costs. There was a research done in 2016 by the leading consulting firm in the world, McKinsey's, that said that in Sub-Saharan Africa, including Nigeria, we were building about 30% more expensive than comparable economies in Southeast Asia. So that means that we have a long way to go in terms of improving the cost efficiency of what we do. If we are able to do that, it will be much easier to access finance. And my final thoughts, and this is the one that most project promoters don't, I think they leave to the last minute. It all starts and ends by ensuring that you have off-takers for your projects, because that is the only thing amongst the many activities that actually brings in money. Everything else is an expenditure. It is your sales and mobilizing sales that actually brings in the money, and that is what helps you to repay a loan. So I think developers need to think about that earlier than later in the development process and devote resources to ensure that they have potential buyers for the homes that they are creating earlier than later. So I think I will stop there, and thank you very much.